In the world of tech startups, there are the show ponies and there are the workhorses. The show ponies are the ones in the $3,000 suits, the ones who get the magazine covers, the ones who talk about disrupting the paradigm while drinking $12 lattes. Then there are the workhorses. We're the ones who actually write the code. We're the ones who stay until 3 a.m. fixing the server crashes caused by the show ponies' impossible promises. I was the lead workhorse at Etherlink, and the biggest show pony of them all was my CEO, Julian Vane. Julian was born with a silver spoon and a platinum tongue. He didn't know the difference between Java and JavaScript, but he knew how to charm an investor out of $10 million in a single lunch. To the world, Julian was the visionary sounder. To me, he was a glorified telemarketer who couldn't even reset his own password. I remember our first meeting. I had just finished the prototype for a neural compression algorithm, the Neuralink. It was a piece of art. It allowed data to move 10 times faster than anything on the market. Julian looked at the demo, blinked his bright, vacant eyes, and patted me on the shoulder. "Great stuff, Maya. Really crunchy. Can we make the interface more blue? Investors love blue." That was my life for 3 years. I built the miracles. He chose the color of the curtains. At Etherlink, the culture was designed to keep people like me invisible. Julian called us the back-end crew, a term he used with the same tone you'd use for a janitorial staff. "Maya is a great order taker," he told a reporter from TechCrunch, while I stood 3 feet away. "She's the hand that builds my vision. I give her the what, and she figures out the how. It's a perfect synergy." Synergy. That's corporate speak for I take the credit and you take the overtime. He would walk into the engineering bay smelling of expensive cologne and ego and ask for minor tweaks that required entire architecture rewrites. When I tried to explain the technical impossibility, he'd just smile that billion-dollar smile. "Don't get bogged down in the no, Maya. Be a yes person. That's how we reached the IPO." The IPO, the initial public offering, the holy grail of the startup world. Etherlink was going public in 6 months. The valuation was projected at $500 million. As the lead engineer, my 5% stake was supposed to be worth $25 million. It was my ticket out, my chance to finally start my own firm and do things the right way. But Julian had other plans for that 5%. He started reorganizing the department. He brought in a new CTO, a college buddy of his named Chad, who spent more time at the gym than on a keyboard. Suddenly, I was being left out of meetings. My name started disappearing from the project headers. "We're just streamlining for the investors, Maya," Julian said when I confronted him. "We need leadership at the top. You're too valuable in the trenches to be distracted by board meetings." One afternoon, Julian's legal assistant dropped a stack of papers on my desk. "Standard pre-IPO disclosure forms," she said. "Just a formality to ensure all intellectual property is properly assigned to the company." Most people would have just signed, but I'm an engineer. I don't just do anything. I read every line. Deep in the fine print of Section 8.4, I saw it. An attempt to retroactively reclassify my Neuralink patent, a patent I had filed privately before I even joined Etherlink, as a work for hire created using company resources. If I signed that paper, I wasn't just assigning the company a license to use my tech, I was giving them the deed to my soul. I didn't sign. I tucked the papers into my bag, went home, and started looking for my original employment contract. I realized then that Julian wasn't just trying to streamline me, he was trying to erase me. I spent the next week playing the order taker. I was polite, I was quiet. I let Julian think I was just another back-end girl who didn't understand the big, scary world of business law. But under the hood, I was running diagnostics on Julian's entire empire. I realized that the $500 million IPO wasn't based on Julian's vision, it was based entirely on the Neuralink. Without it, Etherlink was just a fancy office and a bunch of beanbags. Julian thought he was the architect and I was the bricklayer. He forgot that the architect needs to know where the loading-bearing walls are. I knew exactly where they were, and I was about to pull them down. The call came on a Tuesday morning. No email, no calendar invite, just a Slack message from Julian. "Hey Maya, got a sec for a quick sync in the fishbowl?" In the startup world, a quick sync without an agenda is the corporate equivalent of a blindfold and a cigarette. I walked in, and the air was ice cold. Julian wasn't smiling his billion-dollar smile. He was looking at his Rolex, appearing bored. Chad, the gym bro CTO, was staring at a tablet, refusing to make eye contact. "Maya, thanks for coming in," Julian started, his voice dripping with practiced empathy. "We've been looking at the roadmap for the IPO, and we've realized as we scale, we need a different kind of energy in the lead role, someone with more of a global management pedigree." "You're firing me," I said. No question, just a statement of fact. "We're transitioning you," Julian corrected. "Because you haven't signed the IP assignment paperwork we sent over last week, it's created a bit of a governance friction. We've decided to let you go effective immediately. Your shares are unvested, so they'll revert to the company pool." I felt the blood rush to my ears. My 5% stake, $25 million, was being wiped out with a sentence. "Julian, I didn't sign that paperwork because Section 8.4 is an illegal grab of my private patents," I said, my voice vibrating with controlled rage. Julian leaned forward, his eyes turning into flint. "Maya, let's be real. You developed that tech on our time, on our servers. It belongs to Etherlink. Chad here has already gone through your repositories. He's optimized the core engine. We don't actually need you anymore." "Optimized?" I looked at Chad. "You mean you've put a Chad-branded wrapper over my algorithms?" "It's about the brand, Maya," Chad chimed in, speaking for the first time. "The investors want to see a leadership team that looks like leadership, not a girl in a hoodie who's difficult about paperwork." Security escorted me out 5 minutes later. I wasn't even allowed to grab my favorite mug. I stood on the sidewalk of Market Street with a cardboard box and a sense of betrayal so thick I could taste it. But Julian had made a catastrophic assumption. He thought that because he owned the servers, he owned the logic. I went back to my apartment, the garage lab I'd kept even when I was making 6 figures. I opened my personal, air-gapped laptop. See, Julian's legal team was lazy. They assumed that my employment contract had a standard assignment clause. But I had joined Etherlink as a consultant, and in that initial contract, which Julian had signed over a boozy lunch 3 years ago, there was a tiny handwritten addendum. All prior intellectual property related to Neuralink remains the sole property of the architect, licensed to Etherlink on a revocable basis. The key word was revocable. I spent the next 72 hours without sleep, fueled by spite and espresso. I wasn't just looking at contracts, I was looking at my code. Chad, in his infinite arrogance, hadn't just optimized my engine, he had tried to integrate it into the company's new cloud API. But he didn't understand the heartbeat protocol I'd built into the kernel. Every 24 hours, the Neuralink architecture requires a proprietary handshake with an encrypted key. I had that key. It wasn't on Etherlink's servers. It was on a thumb drive hanging around my neck. If I revoked the license and the handshake failed, the entire Etherlink infrastructure wouldn't just slow down, it would go dark. And the IPO was exactly 14 days away. I didn't call Julian. I didn't beg for my job back. Instead, I sent a very formal, very cold letter from a high-powered patent attorney I'd spent my last $10,000 to retain. The letter was simple. As of 5 p.m. today, the revocable license for the Neuralink architecture is terminated due to breach of contract. You have 48 hours to scrub all protected logic from your servers, or we will seek a federal injunction to halt your IPO. I sat back and watched my monitor. I knew Julian would laugh. I knew he'd call his $1,000 an hour lawyers and tell them to crush the little girl. What he didn't realize is that you can't crush a ghost, and you can't litigate a kill switch that's already been triggered. "The clock is ticking, Julian," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see how blue you can make a dead server." Julian didn't take the letter seriously. Of course he didn't. In his world, a threat was just a negotiation tactic. He told his board of directors that I was a disgruntled ex-employee trying to shake them down for a payout. "She's bluffing," he told the lead investor, a man who had put $50 million into the IPO. "Our legal team has reviewed the contracts. We own the code, the tech is secure, we proceed with the gala tomorrow night." But while Julian was busy selling the lie, Chad was in the server room realizing the truth. The Neuralink wasn't responding to his commands. It's like trying to drive a car when the engine has decided it no longer recognizes the key. At 5:01 p.m., the 48-hour window closed. On my screen, a small red box appeared. Handshake rejected. License expired. Across town at Aetherlink HQ, the synergy Julian loved so much finally collapsed. Their cloud infrastructure, the very thing they were selling to the public, started dropping packets. The latency went from milliseconds to minutes. Their dashboard, the one Julian planned to show off at the IPO gala, turned a flat, dead gray. Julian called me. Not a Slack message, a direct call. I let it go to voicemail. "Maya, you've made your point. This is illegal. You're sabotaging a public offering. We will sue you into the Stone Age. Turn it back on now." I didn't turn it back on. I went to the dry cleaners and picked up my dress for the gala. The gala was held at the top of the Salesforce Tower. The who's who of Silicon Valley was there. Champagne flowed and a massive screen was set up to show the ceremonial first trade countdown. Julian was on stage, looking pale beneath his tan. He was trying to give a speech about the future of connectivity, but every time he gestured to the screen behind him, the demo lagged. The Neuralink wasn't linking anything. It was a $500 million paperweight. I walked in late. I wasn't in a hoodie. I was in a sharp, tailored navy suit, the color Julian said investors love. I stood at the back of the room, sipping a glass of water, watching the show pony finally run out of track. "And now," Julian announced, his voice cracking slightly, "to show you the true power of Aetherlink, we will perform a live data burst to our London servers." He pressed the button. The room went silent. The progress bar on the screen crawled to 2%, then 3%, then it stopped. "Error, unauthorized architecture," flashed across the screen in giant red letters. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Investors started looking at their phones. Julian's lead investor stood up. "Julian, what the hell is this? The SEC is watching this launch. Why is the core engine offline?" Julian looked around desperately. He saw me at the back of the room. Our eyes locked. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the back-end girl. I was the person holding the leash. Julian pointed at me, his finger trembling. "She did this. Maya Vance. She's sabotaging the company. Security, get her out of here." I didn't move. I didn't have to. My attorney stepped forward, handing a thick folder to the lead investor and the SEC representative standing nearby. "My client isn't sabotaging Aetherlink," my lawyer said, his voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "She is simply exercising her rights as the sole owner of the Neuralink patent. Aetherlink's license has been revoked for breach of contract and intellectual property theft. There is no company to take public because the company doesn't own the technology it's selling." The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. It was a sound of a $500 million house of cards hitting the floor. Julian lunged toward me, but security, his own security, stepped in front of him. They knew who actually had the power now. "You're finished, Maya," Julian screamed. "I'll destroy you." "You already tried, Julian," I said, my voice calm and clear. "But you forgot the most basic rule of tech. You can't run a system on a stolen heart." The collapse was faster than the rise. When you build a company on a lie, the truth acts like a vacuum. It sucks everything into the void. Julian didn't just lose the IPO. He lost everything. The lead investors sued him for fraud. The SEC opened an investigation into asset misrepresentation. To save themselves, his own board of directors threw him under the bus, testifying that Julian had assured them the IP was secure. Chad, the Jimbro CTO, was fired within 48 hours. Without my Neuralink core, he couldn't even keep the company's basic email server running. He went from $1 million executive to unemployable in the Valley. Last I heard, he was back to being a personal trainer. At least there, he actually understands the architecture he's working on. 6 months after the gala, Aetherlink declared Chapter 7 bankruptcy. All their assets were put up for auction: the servers, the furniture, and most importantly, the remaining patents and client lists. I walked into that auction room with a venture capital team I'd built myself. I didn't need Julian's charm to get them. I just needed my code. They saw the Neuralink in action and knew it was the future. I bought Aetherlink's infrastructure for pennies on the dollar. I bought back the very servers I used to work on. I even bought Julian's mahogany desk so that I could chop it up and turn it into a coffee station for my engineers. I renamed the company Vance Neural Systems. We didn't focus on disrupting paradigms or market synergy. We focused on building the fastest, most secure data link in human history. I hired back the engineers Julian had fired, the workhorses he had called invisible. I'll never forget the day Julian walked past our new office. He looked 10 years older. The suits were gone, replaced with the cheap off-the-rack jacket. He stood outside the glass doors, looking in at the bustling, successful firm I had built from the wreckage of his greed. I walked to the door. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I just held up my thumb drive, the same one that had been the kill switch to his ego. "Still want that interface to be blue, Julian?" I asked. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away into the San Francisco fog. He was finally what he had always accused me of being, a ghost. People ask me if I feel bad about destroying a $500 million company. I tell them the same thing. I didn't destroy it. I just stopped pretending it was real. If you're a creator, an engineer, or a dreamer, remember this. The people who take credit for your work are only as powerful as you let them be. The moment you claim your own logic, the moment you realize that you are the engine and they are just the paint, that's the moment you become untouchable. My name is Maya Vance. I am the lead architect of my own life, and in my company, the workhorses aren't invisible. They're the ones wearing the crowns.